Hello, I'm Lauren Hubele. I'm here with Cameron Scott. Once again, I'm so delighted to have Cameron here with me. And I'm doing some further exploration in the polyvagal lens and in Gemmotherapy. And I don't have my co-host here with me today, Maegan Lemp, but because this was a little bit more of a personal nature, I thought the recording would just be best suited to just Cameron and myself. So Cameron, welcome. So glad you could be here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Lauren.
Yeah, so as those of you who have been following along with this may recall, Cameron and I first worked together as a client and practitioner. And out of that relationship grew this connection of, wait a minute, I know something about what you're doing, trying to do, and perhaps offer a lens, and my using Cameron to bounce off connections I've made, right, Cameron, as I've made them. But here we are in the moment. And Cameron, there's something that happened really remarkable, significant to me this last weekend. And it certainly got me thinking. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have to talk to Cameron about this. So you ready?
Absolutely. Let's dive in and see, using the polyvagal lens, how we can understand this better.
Yeah, this is great. And being polyvagal informed has certainly helped me have an inner dialogue with myself that I never had before, right? Thank you, Cameron. I'm very grateful for that. However, I hit a spot, which, I mean, of course, that I didn't quite know what direction to take. And I could literally felt like I was moving through this flow chart. So let me tell you.
Please.
So it's a conversation. It's in a area that's somewhat confined, right, in the kitchen. That a topic came up that is a sensitive topic to me that absolutely triggered some old fears and my sympathetic state. Let's just be honest, right? And so I'm in this circumstance, and I feel like this heat, right, in my chest, and I think the first thing that I could feel were these words coming up, like I wanted to fight, right? And I could literally feel the words coming up through my throat, Cameron, and I was like, no, that's not going to be a good thing. That I will trigger this other person's sympathetic state and won't go in a good direction. So I, again, trying to navigate this with myself, the next thought was, I got to get out of here. This doesn't feel safe. I need to get out. Then, knowing that isn't really healthy, responsible, grown up, all the words that I'd like to use, and I really wasn't in physical danger, I went, okay, what's left, right? What are my choices? And realizing this is split second, right? This is like this, and so as I stood there and the conversation continued, because there were enough people to hold the conversation, if I was quiet, I could feel like I'm going to explode. I mean, I'm still here. I'm still standing here. I haven't started fighting. I haven't run away. I don't want to drop into dorsal shutdown and not be present, but it just felt like I'm expanding. Cameron, does this sound like anything you've ever heard before?
Through the polyvagal lens, it's very familiar, Lauren. And what I think speaks to the work that you've done is you have an aspect of resiliency that you did maintain enough of that ventral vagal energy that you could watch this, you could witness this.
Yes.
It did not completely take you away.
Yes.
It, however, didn't suggest that those moments in sequence gave you full choice over the situation. And that has to do with our autonomic nervous system doing its job. Remember, this is neuroception is what our body is telling us, the information it's feeding to our brain. And when there's enough cues, according to our autonomic nervous system, of danger or threat, it takes over. It is that fight or flight survival adaptation.
Okay. So the fact that I was there is normal and expected.
Absolutely.
Right.
Your
Right.
system was doing its job.
Okay. Okay.
Biologically.
Good to know. So Cameron, here's what was really interesting though. I stayed. I felt this very physical like struggle within to stay. Like it was hard to stay. I can't say I stayed in ventral. I mean, I'd be
Maybe
really
not as much ventral as you would have liked, but it's degrees.
right. And that's actually very consoling to me that if I didn't have any ventral, I wouldn't have even been able to see what was going on. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's really interesting to me.
It is. And that's where the work that we do, being able to identify our states, which you have on board, you know, when you can feel that sympathetic energy, that intensity, that urgency, you know, your heart's pumping. These are all the biologic aspects of the fight, flight response. This is the biological imperative. This is the adrenal. This is the cortisol. This is all of what happens to our body when our autonomic nervous system is picking up a significant cue for danger or threat. Absolutely, that's its job.
Okay. And clearly it wasn't appropriate in that situation for me to go search for a Gemmo extract. So I took to heart some of the suggestions you had. I worked with my breathing while I stood there, trying to stay present.
Yeah. You needed to help you identify the state, and then you needed to bring on more ventral vagal energy before you could go into the subtler things that you might do to really support staying in ventral vagal energy.
Talk to me a little bit about that. That's really interesting. So I'm breathing in. I can stay for the duration of the conversation, although it, trust me, it wasn't comfortable.
Yeah. And that is where your system, again, you could feel what was going on in your body. You could even feel that dorsal vagal start to pull you down that hierarchy on the ladder, if you will. But you had enough ventral vagal to name the state, to notice it. And at that point, you were able to separate the present and the intensity of the past and let the story go long enough to really put your first priorities being supporting, staying, supporting, you know, not going completely into a hijacked fight or flight moment.
Wow. You know what I love so much about this polyvagal lens is I think in you know, old school therapy or even new school therapy without polyvagal lens, we would have really gotten caught up into what triggered me, right?
Exactly. And when we're in the midst of a lot of mobilized energy, we're in no place because our prefrontal cortex has gone offline, which is part of what our biology is doing for us when it's a matter of the perception that we need to, for our survival, need to fight or flee.
And I think I know myself, I've spent session after session, could have with something very similar to that, sussing out, well, I think this was, you know, when you were 12 years old and XYZ happened. And you know, Cameron, what I think I'm beginning to understand is maybe that doesn't really even matter.
After the fact, it's nice to have news stories about what might have happened in the past or what's happening now, but truthfully, that's one of the really wonderful things about polyvagal theory. It's not a therapy, it's working with our autonomic nervous system to really have it become that ally and not be that enemy that's going to take you down an old route that you don't have to go down in the present.
Oh, this is so beautiful. And this is where it marries up so well with this
Yes.
work I do.
Yep.
Because it's not about, what you experienced when you were 6 or 12 or 18.
Yep.
It's like, what's your body saying right now?
Yes.
And let's
Yes.
work
And when
with
we get adept as you have in noticing that state, then if somebody's not swinging punches at you or truly threatening your life, then you can have different choices and options in that moment to return to a better regulated state, more ventral vagal energy. And then you've got the resources of your prefrontal cortex and everything else have learned over the years at your disposal.
Wow. Wow. And because we
Plug
really do
in.
have the tools we need, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when mobilization essentially unplugs us into that survival response, we don't have those resources.
Hmm. Hmm. So, Cameron, I'm going to add a twist to this because
Okay.
this has really got me interested. I was interested in that physical sensation, but here's what kind of blew my mind. I left the room, conversation done, did something to kind of distract myself and got something to drink and walked around my house, came and sat down. And when I sat down to have another conversation with someone completely different, I lost my voice. Like instantaneous, like boom, and not just like lost my, it was gone, Cameron. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't say, and then all of a sudden, my brain's ticking like, well, did that shut down? Did my voice go on dorsal vagal shutdown and I didn't? Or how might you interpret that, Cameron?
Well, let me ask, Lauren, what was the energy when you felt like all of a sudden your voice went offline? What else did you notice in your body and your system right then?
There was still the tension, Cameron. There's
Yep.
no doubt. I mean, that hadn't gone away.
Yeah.
This
High
sense,
intensity energy tension or low intensity?
hmm, hmm. It's a little difficult to answer, and maybe I'm not being so helpful here because I was really engaged with a lovely conversation with someone
Yeah.
in a completely different topic. So in a little bit of way, I think this was going on in background noise, clearly.
Yep.
Not,
Well, and I'm going to upgrade your term background noise, that your autonomic nervous system through neuroception was resetting itself, rebooting, is because it had been through your autonomic nervous system a substantial energy surge, a substantial challenge. And our systems do regulate up, but it's kind of re-regulating, it's coming back. And that's actually a very important, and your system took you away from your voice for a little bit there, just as I believe it was actually processing that coming back, which is so much an importance of recognizing that our systems bring us back, whether we're getting in their way or not.
wow, wow. Well, on a very practical gemmotherapeutic level, I found it particularly interesting that I have protocols that help with the loss of voice or sore throat,
Mm-hmm.
but
And tell me how you use them.
well, nothing that worked would nor have worked on a physical level helped. And it wasn't until I started thinking to myself, this is emotional, this is my nervous system, because I even felt like this tension, here in my throat.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I began to use an extract or two that helps with fluidity, that helps the autonomic nervous system regulate,
Yes.
then it literally was mid-sentence. Again, my voice came back.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
I love that. And when you speak about the particular tensions in your throat and the loss of the voice, that suggests there was still the continuation of that sympathetic mobilized response, because our sympathetic aspect of our autonomic nervous system lives pretty much from our lower head down to the diaphragm. If we put a hand behind our neck and behind our middle back, that pretty much maps out biologically where the cues will be coming from that would suggest mobilization.
Wow.
And your system outside of your awareness was rebooting. And it's like if your computer gets overwhelmed too much, it just shuts down in the ways that it does momentarily, and then it can come back online again.
So in rethinking that and replaying it, probably the best thing for me would have been not to jump on another conversation or call, but to take the time for myself to reboot. And perhaps that might not have happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, every new piece of information is useful experience. So
Sure.
we can wonder what might have been better, but you did something differently. Your system was right there. We're going to really savor that your system did bring you back. And I think we often talk about when we recognize we're heading in that really mobilized response, whatever we can do to gently interrupt, redirect, whatever needs to happen is simply not getting totally hijacked into a mobilized response.
Hijacked. I love that term.
And that's biologically hijacked.
Exactly. Cameron, thank you so much. You have shed so much light on this for me, and I am sure our listeners have all had themselves in a similar circumstance.
And there's something really quite wonderful, and that's why I was excited for this moment. Now you can appreciate really having witnessed your autonomic nervous system in action and returning you to regulation. You have now that embodied wisdom to bring to all the people you work with and with Gemmotherapy. So,
oh, beautiful.
thank you.
Cameron, thanks for being with me today.